The coalition fleet gathered at the edge of known space. 100 warships from 17 species, forming a protective sphere around the small transport that carried Jinha toward the awakened precursor installation. Through the viewport of her cabin, she could see the structure in the distance, a ring of impossible size surrounding a point of absolute darkness. Its surface covered in symbols that pulsed with the same golden light as the blade in her hand. "The boundary of stars," Gorath said, standing beside her with his new armor bearing the ancient symbol of the Protector Knights. "My people told stories of this place when I was young. Stories of a gate that would open when the galaxy was ready for unity. Do you think we are ready?" Jinha asked, watching the installation grow larger as they approached. "I think that is what we are about to find out." The transport docked with the installation, and Jinha stepped onto a platform that seemed to be made of solidified. Starlight, Gorath, and a small honor guard followed behind her, their footsteps echoing in a space that felt both impossibly vast and strangely intimate. The blade guided her forward, its warmth leading her through corridors that rearranged themselves as she walked, until she stood before a chamber at the heart of the structure inside. A figure of pure light awaited her. "I am the guardian of the threshold," it announced, its voice carrying harmonics that resonated with frequencies beyond human hearing. "I have waited 12,000 years for one who is worthy to enter this place. I am Jinha," she replied, "and I still do not understand why the blade chose me." "Then let me show you." The chamber transformed around her, and suddenly Jinha stood in a vast simulation of the galaxy, watching civilizations rise and fall across millions of years. She saw the precursors at the height of their power, beings who had mastered technology so advanced it seemed like magic. And she saw them reach a terrible realization. "We became gods," the Guardian explained. "And gods have no equals, only worshippers and enemies. So we built this installation and forged the blade and prepared for the day when someone would prove that divinity was not the answer." The vision shifted to show champions approaching the blade throughout history, each one burning with ambition and desire for the power it represented. Every species that achieved greatness believed they deserved to inherit our legacy, and every champion they sent believed they were destined for glory. But ambition is a form of hunger that can never be satisfied. "What makes humans different?" Jinha asked. Though she was beginning to understand the answer, "Nothing makes humans different," the Guardian replied, "except that they have not yet learned to see themselves as superior. And you in particular have never wanted anything for yourself." The visions faded, and Jinha found herself facing a test she had not expected. The Guardian showed her what the blade could do in her hand. Civilizations united under her will. Wars ended by her command. The entire galaxy reshaped according to her vision. You could bring peace to every world, it offered. You could end suffering and conflict and division forever. And all you would need to do is rule. Jinha felt the temptation for a moment, the seductive whisper of power that promised everything she had ever dreamed of achieving. Then she remembered her grandmother's garden, the cooked vegetables and the patched fishing nets, and the simple joy of helping without expecting anything in return. "I do not want to rule," she said firmly. "I became an engineer because I wanted to build things that help people. And I became a translator because I wanted to help species understand each other. And I would give up this blade in a heartbeat if I could go back to that life." The Guardian was silent for a long moment, its light flickering in patterns that might have been surprise or satisfaction or both. "That is why you are worthy," it finally said. "The blade was never meant to create conquerors, and this installation was never meant to give power to those who desired it. And the precursors left us both for someone who would use them only to serve." The chamber transformed one final time, revealing the installation's true purpose. It was not a weapon or a throne room or a seat of cosmic power. It was a beacon, designed to send a signal across the universe that would call all Intelligent life, to gather and communicate and cooperate. Precursors had built it for the day when the galaxy was ready to unite, not through conquest, but through choice. Activate the beacon, the Guardian instructed, and deliver our message to those who have gathered outside. Jinha raised the blade and pressed it into a slot that seemed designed specifically for its shape. Light exploded outward from the installation, washing over the gathered fleet and spreading beyond to touch every corner of the galaxy. With it came words in every language ever spoken. Words that translated themselves into meaning that transcended mere communication. Power reveals truth, the message proclaimed. She reached for nothing and received everything, and in her example lies the path forward. For the greatest strength is found not in domination, but in service. Jinha felt the blade release from her hand for the first time since it had chosen her, and she watched it float to the center of the chamber, where it would remain as a symbol for all who came after. You no longer need it, the Guardian explained. The blade chose you to prove that worthiness exists, and now its purpose passes to others who will come here seeking guidance. What happens now? Jinha asked, feeling strangely light without the weapon's familiar weight. Now you return to your people and show them what you have learned. And when conflicts arise, you will be called upon to help resolve them. Not with power, but with understanding. The fleet escorts waited outside the installation, their captains stunned by the message they had received and the light that still pulsed through their ships. Gorath stood at the airlock as Jinha returned, his face bearing an expression of wonder and hope that she had never expected to see on Kavath features. The other delegations are asking to speak with you, he reported. They want to know what the message means and how they should respond. Tell them I will meet with anyone who wants to talk, Jinha said, and remind them that I am not their leader or their ruler, just someone who wants to help. She looked back at the installation one final time, watching its beacon pulse against the darkness of space. Humanity's place in the galaxy had changed forever, not because they had proven themselves stronger or more advanced than the elder species, but because one human had shown that strength without ambition was possible. The blade that chose no one had found its master in a human who never wanted to be a master at all, and in that paradox lay the beginning of a new era, one that would be built not on power and conquest, but on service and cooperation, and the simple truth that the worthy ones are always those who do not seek worthiness for themselves. Jinha smiled as the transport began its journey back to the fleet, ready to begin the long and difficult work of helping civilizations learn to understand each other. She was still just an engineer at heart, still just someone who wanted to build things that helped people, but now she had a galaxy full of bridges to build. And for the first time since this impossible journey began, she felt ready for the task ahead. The assassins moved through the citadel like shadows, their black armor absorbing light and their weapons humming with deadly energy. And Jinha counted at least 12 of them converging on her position from multiple directions. She recognized their fighting style immediately. Kavath honor guards, the most elite warriors their civilization had ever produced, sent to reclaim what they believed rightfully belonged to their people. Get the children to the inner sanctuary, she ordered the rescue workers still gathered behind her. I will hold them here. You cannot fight 12 Kavath warriors alone, Master Vorath protested. But Jinha noticed he made no move to stand beside her. I do not intend to fight them, she replied, raising the blade and letting its golden light fill the corridor. I intend to stop them from hurting anyone else. The first assassin came through the window in an explosion of glass and fury, all four arms wielding blades that crackled with disruptor energy. Jinha did not try to match his speed or his skill, because she knew she would fail if she attempted to fight on his terms. Instead, she focused on the wall behind her, on the people fleeing down the corridor, on everything she needed to protect. Xiongwu blade responded by creating a barrier of light that caught the assassin's strike and held it, suspended in midair. Warrior's eyes widened in shock as his momentum carried him into the barrier, and the golden light pulsed once before throwing him backward through the window. He had entered two more assassins attacked from opposite sides, their movements perfectly synchronized in a pattern designed to overwhelm any defensive. Jinha spun the blade in an arc around her body, not trying to cut them but simply extending her protective barrier in all directions. The assassin's weapons sparked and failed as they struck the golden shield, their disruptor energy absorbed and neutralized by whatever ancient power flowed through the blade. "Impossible," one of them hissed, backing away and signaling for his companions to regroup. "No wielder has ever manifested barriers of this strength. No wielder ever wanted to," Jinha said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. They all wanted to attack, to conquer, to prove themselves through destruction. But the blade was never meant for that. The assassins spread out around her, clearly changing their tactics as they realized that direct assault would not work. Jinha heard fighting elsewhere in the citadel and knew that other defenders were engaging more of the attackers. But she could not leave her position without abandoning the people behind her. "You are one human," said a voice from the shadows, deeper and more commanding than the others. "You cannot protect everyone forever." A massive Kavath warrior stepped into the light, and Jinha recognized the scarred face of Warlord Goroth himself. He had come to finish what the choosing ceremony had denied him, and the hatred in his eyes burned brighter than any weapon. "The blade rejected you," Jinha said, standing her ground despite every instinct screaming at her to run. "It will never be yours." "Then I will take it from your corpse," Goroth snarled, raising a war axe that glowed with enough power to cut through starship armor. "Honor demands blood for the insult your existence represents." He attacked with speed that should have been impossible for someone his size, the axe sweeping toward Jinha's head in a blow meant to end the fight in a single strike. She raised the blade to block, knowing she lacked the strength to stop his momentum, knowing that this was probably the end of her strange journey. But the blade had other ideas. Golden light erupted from the weapon in a wave that filled the corridor, and when it touched Goroth, he froze in mid-swing, as if time itself had stopped around him. The other assassins froze as well, suspended in the amber glow, while Jinha stood at the center of the light, breathing hard and trying to understand what had happened. "Show them," she whispered to the blade, not knowing where the words came from but trusting that they were right. "Show them what you showed me." The light pulsed, and Jinha felt visions flowing through her and into the frozen warriors. She saw them experiencing what she had experienced in the training yard, the truth of the blade's creation, the purpose behind its long rejection of champions, the reason why ambition and desire for power would always fail. She saw their minds opening to possibilities they had never considered, histories they had never learned, ideals that their warrior culture had buried long ago. The light faded, and the assassins fell to their knees as time resumed its normal flow. Goroth dropped his axe and stared at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. "The Protector Knights," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We destroyed their memory because they shamed us with their compassion. But they were right all along." Jinha lowered the blade, watching as tears streamed down the warlord's scarred face. "What did you see?" she asked gently. "I saw what we could have been," Goroth replied. "I saw warriors who fought not for glory, but for those who could not fight for themselves. And I saw my ancestors burning their teachings, because strength without cruelty felt like weakness." He rose slowly and removed his weapons, placing them on the floor before Jinhathan. To her complete shock, he knelt before her with his head bowed. "My blade is yours," he said, using words from an ancient oath that Jinha somehow understood through the connection she shared with the Xian Wu blade. "I will protect you as the old knights protected the innocent, and I will follow where you lead." The other assassins followed his example, kneeling in a circle around Jinha, while the golden light of the blade bathed them all in warmth. Coalition guards burst into the corridor moments later, weapons ready for a battle that had already ended in a way none of them could have predicted. Jinha stood among her former enemies, now all eyes bound to her by an oath older than most civilizations, and she felt the blade humming with satisfaction. She was still not a warrior, but she was beginning to understand that she did not need to be. Xiaomu Blade had chosen her precisely because she would never seek to use its power for herself, and in doing so, she had gained something far more valuable than combat skill. She had gained the loyalty of warriors who finally understood what true strength meant. But as the guards escorted them all to the council chamber, an emergency transmission cut through every communication device in the Citadel. A precursor installation has awakened at the boundary of stars, announced a mechanical voice. The beacon is calling for the wielder of the Xiaomu Blade. Jinha looked at Garth, who met her eyes with determination, replacing the shame he had shown moments before. It seems we have a journey to make, he said. Then we make it together, Jinha replied, and the blade in her hand pulsed in agreement. 3 weeks passed in the Council Citadel, and Jinha learned that being chosen by a legendary weapon meant very little when you had no idea how to use it. The training masters assigned to her came from 6 different species, each one convinced that their method would unlock the blade's true potential, and each one left frustrated when their techniques produced nothing but failure. Strike with intention, commanded Master Varth, a Kavith warrior who had reluctantly agreed to train her despite his people's anger at her selection. Feel the blade as an extension of your arm and channel your aggression through it. Jinha swung the weapon at the training dummy, putting all her strength into the blow. But the blade passed through the target without leaving a mark. You hold back, Voreth growled, his forearms crossed in disappointment. You strike like someone who does not wish to cause harm. Because I do not wish to cause harm, Jinha admitted, lowering the blade and feeling its weight settle against her hip. I became an engineer to build things, not to destroy them. Vareth made a sound of disgust and walked away, leaving her alone in the training yard with nothing but her thoughts and her useless weapon. The Mindweaver instructors fared no better. Their attempts to help her connect with the blade on a psychic level, producing only headaches and frustration. The Vorn combat analysts studied her movements and declared that she possessed no natural fighting ability whatsoever. Each failure added to the whispers that followed her everywhere. Whispers that said the blade had made a mistake and that humans truly were as worthless as everyone believed. Jinha sat in the training yard long after the instructors had given up for the day, watching the 3 sons of Velithor sink toward the horizon and painting the sky in colors. She had no names for the blade rested across her knees. Its golden glow dimmed to almost nothing, and she found herself thinking about home. She remembered her grandmother's house by the sea, the small building with its weathered walls and its garden full of vegetables that never quite grew straight. She remembered learning to fix the fishing nets when they tore, and learning to repair the boat engine when it failed, and learning that the greatest satisfaction came not from grand achievements, but from small acts of service. Her grandmother had taught her that strength meant protecting those who could not protect themselves, and that true power lay in choosing to help rather than choosing to dominate. Those lessons had guided Jinha through her education and her career, leading her to specialize in engineering systems that provided clean water and sustainable power to communities that needed them most. She had never sought glory or recognition, and she had been happy with her quiet life of service before the coalition had recruited her as a translator. I do not know what you want from me, she said to the blade, speaking to it as if it could hear her. I am not a warrior, and I do not wish to become one. The blade pulsed once, and suddenly Jinna's mind filled with images that were not her own. She saw the precursors as they had been 12,000 years ago. Beings of light and wisdom who had created wonders beyond imagination. She saw them forge the blade, not as a weapon of war, but as a tool of protection, designed to shield the innocent and cut through the barriers that divided civilizations. She saw champion after champion approach the blade throughout the millennia, each one burning with ambition and desire for power. And she understood why each one had been rejected. The blade had been waiting for someone who did not want. A commotion at the edge of the training yard pulled Jinha from her vision, and she looked up to see smoke rising from one of the Citadel's residential towers. Screams echoed across the courtyard, and she heard someone shouting about a structural collapse. Jinha was running before she consciously decided to move, her engineering instincts overriding her fear as she pushed through the crowd gathering at the tower's base. Inside, she found chaos. A support beam had failed on the third level, bringing down a section of ceiling and trapping a group of young acolytes in a room that was slowly filling with smoke from a broken heating unit. Rescue workers struggled to reach them, but the debris blocked every entrance, and the structure was too unstable for heavy equipment. "Stand back," Jinha ordered, pushing past the rescue coordinator without waiting for permission. She raised the blade and focused not on attacking the debris, but on protecting the children trapped behind it. The weapon blazed to life in her hand, brighter than she had ever seen it, and when she swept it through the air, it cut through the fallen beam as easily as cutting through water. More importantly, a shield of golden light spread from the blade to hold back the remaining debris while the rescue workers pulled the acolytes to safety. Jinha worked without thinking, letting her instincts guide her as she cut paths through wreckage and shielded victims from falling stone. The blade responded to her every intention, not because she commanded it, but because her only desire was to help the people in danger. When the last child was carried to safety and the damaged section had been stabilized, Jinha found herself standing in the ruined corridor with the blade still glowing in her hand. A crowd had gathered behind her, including several of the training masters who had declared her unteachable. "How did you do that?" Master Verth demanded, his voice filled with something that might have been respect. "You could not cut a training dummy this morning." Jinha looked at the blade, understanding finally dawning in her mind. "I was not trying to cut anything," she said slowly. "I was trying to protect someone." The blade pulsed in agreement, and Jinha felt its warmth spreading through her chest like an embrace from an old friend. Those champions had failed because they approached the blade with ambition and desire for power. They wanted to use it to elevate themselves above others, to prove their worth through domination and strength. But the precursors had created something different, something that responded only to selflessness and the desire to protect. Jinha had spent her whole life learning to serve others, and that was exactly what the blade had been waiting for. Master Varth stared at her for a long moment, then slowly bowed his head. "Perhaps I was wrong about humans," he admitted, the words clearly costing him great effort. "Perhaps there is a form of strength that my people do not understand." Jinha smiled, feeling more confident than she had since this impossible journey began. But her moment of peace shattered when a messenger burst into the corridor with panic written across his features. "The Citadel perimeter has been breached," he gasped. "Assassins are inside the walls, and they are coming for the blade wielder." Jinha's grip tightened on her weapon, and she felt it humming with readiness. She was no warrior, but she had something more important than combat training. She had a purpose worth fighting for. The temple guardians surrounded Jinha with weapons pointed at her chest, their faces showing a mixture of fear and disbelief that she had never seen on alien features before. "Put down the blade," the lead guardian commanded, her voice trembling despite her obvious effort to sound authoritative. "Put it down immediately." Jinha tried to release the weapon, opening her fingers and shaking her hand, but the blade remained attached to her palm as if it had grown there. "I cannot," she said, panic rising in her throat. "It will not let go of me." More figures rushed into the chamber, and Jinha recognized Ambassador Theraxis among them. His normally composed face twisted with shock as he stared at the glowing weapon in her. And behind him came delegates from a dozen species, all pushing forward to see the impossible sight of a human holding the Xianwu blade. "This is a trick," growled Warlord Gorath, shoving his way through the crowd with his massive frame. Humans are known for their deception and their technology, and this primitive creature has somehow fooled the artifact. "The inscriptions have awakened," said a Veloci scholar, pointing to the walls where precursor text still blazed with golden light. "That cannot be faked. And the blade has not glowed like this in recorded history." The chamber erupted into chaos as species began arguing with each other, accusations flying back and forth, while Jinha stood at the center of it all, wishing she could disappear into the floor. She had never wanted attention, had never sought power or recognition, and now she held the most coveted artifact in the galaxy, while the most powerful beings in known space screamed at each other about what to do with her. "Silence," commanded a new voice that cut through the noise like a blade through cloth. Everyone turned to see the High Arbiter of the Coalition Council entering the chamber, her ancient Eulith form floating above the ground, her crystalline eyes reflecting the light of the blade. "The choosing is sacred law," she announced, her voice reaching every corner of the vast space. "It cannot be challenged, and it cannot be undone. And if the blade has chosen this human, then we must accept the will of the precursors." "Unacceptable," Gora snarled, stepping forward with his hands clenched into fists. "The Kaveth have waited 3,000 years for this moment, and we will not be denied by some insignificant creature from a backwater world." "Then challenge her," the High Arbiter replied calmly. "Challenge her, and take the blade if you can." Garth moved toward Jinha with murder in his eyes, and she raised the blade instinctively, having no idea how to use it, but hoping it would protect her. The weapon hummed in her grip, and a barrier of golden light materialized between her and the approaching warlord. Gorath struck the barrier with all four of his arms, putting enough force into the blow to crack starship hull plating. But the light held firm and pushed him backward. "The bond is genuine," the High Arbiter declared. "The blade protects its wielder, as it has always been written." "Then we must study this phenomenon," suggested a Thalis mindweaver, floating forward with obvious scientific interest. "Perhaps there is something in human biology that triggers a different response from the artifact. Perhaps humans have been lying about their capabilities all along," countered a Vorn delegate, his crystalline body pulsing with agitation. "They claim to be primitive. But what if that was merely a disguise?" Jinha wanted to laugh at the absurdity of that suggestion, because humanity had barely mastered interstellar travel and still struggled to understand the basic technology that elder species took for granted. But she held her tongue, knowing that anything she said would only make things worse. Ambassador Theraxis approached her slowly, his eyes calculating as they always were when he saw an opportunity. "Perhaps this is a gift," he said smoothly, addressing the crowd rather than Jinha. "Perhaps the precursors intended to show us that even the youngest species can contribute to our great coalition. A gift that belongs to the Veloci delegation," he added quietly, leaning close to Jinha. "You work for us, and what you possess belongs to us as well. The blade belongs to no delegation," the High Arbiter interrupted. Having heard the whispered words, "Its wielder serves the coalition as a whole, and she will be given quarters in the Council Citadel where she can be trained and protected." Jinha felt relief wash through her at those words, because she did not trust the look in Theraxis's eyes, but she also felt terror at the thought of what training might involve, and what being protected might cost her. The crowd parted at his temple, Attendants led her out of the chamber, and she felt the weight of countless eyes following her every step. Whispers followed her as well. Words and languages she could not understand, but tones she recognized easily enough. Hatred, fear, jealousy, curiosity. Every emotion imaginable seemed to fill the air around her. Quarters they gave her were beautiful beyond anything she had ever experienced, with windows overlooking gardens that contained plants from 100 worlds and furniture that adjusted itself to her comfort without being asked, but the beauty felt like a cage. And Jinha sat on the edge of her bed with the blade still attached to her hand, wondering how long she would survive in this new life. She had never asked for a knock at her door, made her jump, and she called out permission to enter with a voice that shook only slightly. A young Veloci attendant stepped inside, her scales a pale blue that indicated low rank, and she carried a tray of food that actually looked edible by human standards. "The council wishes you to know that they are discussing your situation," the attendant said, setting down the tray. "There are many who believe you should be examined, and many who believe you should be executed, and many who believe you should be worshipped. What do you believe?" Jinha asked. Surprising herself with the question, the attendant paused, looking at Jinha with an expression that seemed almost sympathetic. "I believe you did not ask for this," she said softly. "I believe the blade chose you for reasons none of us understand. And I believe that you are in great danger from those who cannot accept what has happened." She left before Jinha could respond, and the door sealed behind her with a soft click that sounded far too much like a lock. Engaging Jinha looked down at the blade in her hand, watching its gentle golden glow pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. "Why me?" she asked it. Not expecting an answer, the blade grew warm against her palm, and for just a moment, she felt something that might have been reassurance flowing through her mind. Whatever came next, she would not face it alone. But as she heard voices arguing in the corridor outside her room, voices filled with anger and ambition and fear, Jinha wondered if even a legendary precursor artifact would be enough to keep her alive in the days to come. The Temple of Resonance stood at the heart of the ancient world called Velithor, its crystalline spires reaching toward a sky painted with 3 distant suns. And on this sacred day, representatives from 17 species had gathered to witness an event that occurred only once every 100 years. Jinha pressed herself against the far wall of the ceremonial chamber, trying to remain invisible among the towering alien delegates who filled the vast space. And she reminded herself that she was here only to translate and assist. Nothing more. The Veloci delegation had brought her along because humans were useful for menial tasks, and because her translation skills were excellent, even if her species was considered primitive by galactic standards. At the center of the chamber, resting on a pedestal carved from stone older than most civilizations, lay the San Wu blade. The weapon glowed with an inner light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, and ancient texts claimed it had been forged by the precursors themselves before they vanished from the galaxy 12,000 years ago. Every species present believed that today would finally be the day when the blade chose its master. The Kaveth warlord Gorath will now approach the sacred weapon, announced the temple guardian, her voice echoing through the chamber like distant thunder. Jinha watched as the massive warrior stepped forward, his scaled hide gleaming under the ceremonial lights, and his 4 arms flexed with barely contained power as he reached toward the blade. The Kaveth were among the most feared warriors in the known galaxy, and Gorath had earned his title through 100 victorious campaigns. Surely the blade would recognize such strength. Gorath's clawed hand closed around the hilt, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the blade released a wave of energy that lifted the warlord off his feet and threw him backward across the chamber, and he crashed into the stone floor with enough force to crack the ancient tiles beneath him. A murmur of shock rippled through the gathered delegates, The blade has rejected the caveth. Champion, the guardian announced without emotion. Jinha felt her heart beating faster as she watched Gorath rise to his feet, his eyes burning with humiliation and rage. But he said nothing as he retreated to his delegation. Next came the Mindweaver of Thalas, a being of pure psychic energy contained within a crystalline shell. And the delegates whispered that she could read the thoughts of entire planets and bend reality. With her will alone, she approached the blade with confidence, extending tendrils of mental energy toward it. The rejection came faster this time, a pulse of light that shattered her outer shell and sent her fragments scattering across the floor. And her attendants rushed forward to gather the pieces before she could dissipate entirely one by one. The champions of the elder species approached the blade, and one by one, they were found unworthy. Crystalline Arbiter of the Vorn Collective lasted 3 seconds before being thrown back. The ancient dreamer of the Ulith expanse could not even touch the pedestal before the blade rejected him. A warrior queen, a philosopher king, a being who claimed to have lived since before the precursors vanished. All were cast aside like unwanted toys. Jinha found herself fascinated despite her determination to remain unnoticed, and she wondered what criteria the blade used to judge its potential. Wielder's 12,000 years of rejection suggested that perhaps no living being could meet its standards. The ceremony has concluded, the guardian announced as the last champion fell, her voice heavy with disappointment that even her training could not hide. The Xianwu blade remains unchosen, and we will gather again in 100 years to repeat this sacred ritual. The delegates began filing out of the chamber, their conversations a mixture of relief and frustration. And Jinha heard the Cavith delegation muttering about the unfairness of ancient precursor artifacts. Ambassador Theraxis, the leader of the Veloci delegation, paused beside Jinha on his way out. Clean the chamber and prepare it for sealing, he said without looking at her, his attention already on the political conversations he would need to have. Humans are good at cleaning, yes. Jinha swallowed her irritation and nodded, because arguing with a Veloci ambassador would only make her situation worse. She waited until the chamber had emptied completely before beginning her work, gathering the ceremonial items that had been left behind and sweeping the dust from the ancient stones. The blade continued to pulse with its strange inner light, and Jinha found herself drawn to look at it more closely. She had never seen a precursor artifact before, and the scientists of Earth would have given anything for a chance to study such a device. As she moved around the pedestal, her equipment cart bumped against the stone base, and she stumbled forward to catch a falling scanner. Her hand brushed against the blade. Jinha froze, waiting for the rejection energy to throw her across the room, waiting for the pain that every champion had experienced instead. She felt warmth spreading through her fingers, and the blade began to hum with a sound that resonated somewhere deep in her chest. That cannot be right, she whispered to herself. Pulling her hand back quickly, the humming stopped, but the blade's glow had changed from cold white to a warm gold that seemed to reach toward her like sunlight breaking through cloud. She now stared at the weapon, her mind racing through possibilities, and she told herself that she must have imagined the sensation. She was a human, a member of the youngest and least respected species in the coalition, and she was certainly not worthy of an artifact that had rejected the greatest champions in the galaxy. But when she took a step backward, the blade's glow dimmed, and when she stepped forward again, it brightened. "This is impossible," she said, her voice barely audible in the vast empty chamber. The blade pulsed once, twice, 3 times, and then it rose from the pedestal for the first time in 12,000 years. Jinha wanted to run, wanted to call for help, wanted to do anything except stand there while an ancient weapon of unimaginable power drifted toward her. But her feet would not move, and her voice would not come. and she could only watch as the Xianwu blade floated through the air and settled gently into her outstretched palm the moment her fingers closed around the hilt. Light exploded through the chamber, and ancient inscriptions that had been dark for millennia blazed to life across every wall. Words in the precursor language scrolled across the stone. And though Jinha had never studied their writing, she understood their meaning as clearly as if they had been written in her native tongue. The worthy one carries no ambition for power, only purpose for others. Alarms began screaming throughout the temple, and Jinha heard the thunder of running feet approaching the chamber. And she knew that her life had just changed in ways she could not begin to understand. The blade felt right in her hand, as if it had always belonged there, as if she had been born to hold it. And as the temple guardians burst through the doors with weapons raised, their faces twisted in shock at what they witnessed, Jinha realized that she had no idea what she was supposed to do next. She was just an engineer, just a translator, just a human trying to make her way in a galaxy that barely acknowledged her species existed. But the blade had chosen her, and nothing would ever be the same again.